Okay, so I'll go ahead and okay, so got this group of estuary leaders, at least in training. I think some of us have on the ground estuaries, and then the rest of us are hoping to sometime soon. And just to kind of do a little demo of what this whole estuary thing is about, I'm going to kind of act tonight like I would if it were my own group. So I probably won't talk very much and let you guys talk. But since we have a new person, I think all of us know each other except for, but there is one new person. So we should go ahead and go around and do introductions as we do. Although since we're recording this on the internet, you don't have to say where you are if you don't want to. So let's go ahead and start with Karen.
Hi, my name's Karen. Okay, so I can skipping the city. I guess are we saying how we found our way to Estuary?
Mm-hmm. Usual introductions.
Usual introductions. Okay. Well, I guess I started listening to Jordan Peterson, and then I found my way to Paul Vanderklay, and then here. Pass.
How about you, Phil?
Hey, hi, I'm Philip Nickerson, and I live in Nova Scotia with my wife and 2 cats. Became a Christian in 2021, was baptized and confirmed into the Catholic Church last April at Easter Vigil. I had the usual Rogan to Peterson to PPK pipeline. It was probably back in 2017 or 18, but I kind of dropped PPK for a while because wasn't really understanding a whole lot of what he was talking about, but I tried him a couple different times. Then when I came back to check out a video, it was a randos video. So I got hooked on the randos video. And it was through the rando videos, actually, that I got more serious about going to church and becoming a Christian. So it's been a good journey. Pass.
All right. Corey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Corey. I'm in Virginia right now. Move fairly frequently being in the military, but in 2018, my wife read Jordan Peterson's book first. She gets the credit for discovering him. So the entry was to Jordan Peterson, his biblical lectures, various other things, then went into a deep dive on Jonathan Pageau, and more recently discovered Paul Vanderklay just in the last year and a half or so. Super interested in making this manifest in reality in Estuary. That's where we're at now.
Thank you. How about you, Joel?
Yes, Joel Trowbridge. Excuse me. I discovered Vanderklay through Paul Ann Leitner's Deep Talks podcast. And I was familiar with Peterson prior to that too, but that's how I discovered Vanderklay, and I eventually learned about Estuary, and I was doing something kind of similar in my church, and I thought it'd be good to be a part of the L's Net. So that's how I found everybody here.
Grim, introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, I'm Grim Grizz from the internet. You may have heard Paul Vanderklay say my name on occasion. This came about because there's no reason it shouldn't. And there's this really great talk I just did with PVK in Sevilla. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there's this space where we are now, this pocket dimension of Zoom. This is where I've been living while you guys were going and making your lives as normal humans. And so I'm the internet troll under the bridges of meaning. And that's how I ended up in the Zoom call with you.
Thanks, Grim. Appreciate it. How about you, Doug?
Hey everybody, I'm Doug. I'm currently on my way back home, cheering on my wife who ran her 15th half marathon. But so live about an hour north of Philadelphia, and found this all through, I think it was starting off with Tim Ferriss and then IDW guys, and then happened to hear about Jordan Peterson. And I still cannot recall exactly how I flipped over to the PVK side, but Grim, you'd probably recognize me. I'm Screwtape 316. I'm your serial liker on Twitter.
It's an
Thanks.
honor and a privilege to finally be in a place with you.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. And I'm Nate, and I live in Washington State. And every time I say this, I always say, the standard Peterson to PVK pipeline. And I also mentioned that I didn't really care for PVK's content at first. And it was the randos content that made me rethink that. But specifically, since I have Grim here tonight, I have to say that it was specifically Grim's conversation that got my attention and made me say, hey, there's something here. And particularly with what Grim was saying about breaking the fourth wall. I thought that was really important. And I thought that he was speaking to something that Paul already intuited and was in some sense doing in the randos conversation. And I found that to be very aligned with what I wanted to try to do in the world too. So that made me want to get involved in this estuary thing. Seemed like a good way to do it. So I did. So now that we've introduced everyone, I think you probably, Grim, I'm guessing you probably caught the demo video that Paul did, because John Van Donk is a horrible leaker who
Yes,
leaks
yes.
our secrets.
Well, I think that Paul caught wind we were going to do this and stole the idea for a Friday show and
Yep.
did the example one. So
He did. When I suggested to Van Donk in our last leaders meeting that he may have been the leaker, he kind of grinned like a Cheshire cat. So I think we can take that as confirmation. So, which is fine. It's totally fine. More of it's out there in the world for people to see, the better. I'm glad that Paul did it. So the way you kind of got some idea of how this works. So we're going to go ahead and follow that same protocol here. And once again, since we were last together, Karen, what have you been thinking about?
Well, since we were last together, a lot's happened. I found a church. I've been looking one for a long time, and I finally went there and attended High Mass. It was sung in Latin. It was just beautiful. I cried.
I'm jealous.
Pardon?
I'm jealous.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're just beautiful people, and they had before Mass they have a get together in the basement, sort of a potluck thing, and you get to just go and talk with people. It's really warm and it's just wonderful. So anyways, that's on and I'm back in RCIA now. So yeah, so that's on the personal level. Intellectually, I guess one thing I've been thinking about, although I really don't know how to put it, like I've been trying to think all day about what I'm going to say now, and I just haven't really found the words for it. I guess I'm thinking about sin, and I think of sin in terms of not like thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, that sort of thing. But then I also think about sin in terms of not loving one's neighbor, like not loving God, not loving one's neighbor, and like these more goal-directed things. And it seems almost that there's two different ideas of sin, like the grocery list idea, and then the idea that it's falling short of reaching some sort of a goal. Like if I wanted to become better at public speaking and I don't go to one of the classes that I've signed up to attend, I mean, that's me falling short of the goal, because if I went, it would help me accomplish the goal, and not going is going the other way. But it's not really a sin, right? Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about. I hope that makes some sense. And I'm going to stop babbling now, so pass.
All right, Phil, what have you been thinking about?
Hey, first I want to say, Grim, that I love your conversations with Karen Wong. I think I said that in a comment before. They're just really sweet. And you guys really connect really well. So they're great to listen to. Personally, I'm kind of marking the passage of time because September started off with my niece's wedding, and it brought to mind just when my wife and I got married 22 years ago, and who was at our wedding. And of course, not like there's quite a few people that aren't with us anymore, like have passed on. So that's something to think about. And then October, I was helping that same niece and her new husband help clear some land of some trees where they're building a new house. And then this month, helping my parents-in-law move out of their long-term house into an apartment. So it's kind of heavy stuff to think about, but I'm also grateful, like especially thinking about all the memories in their house. Like the prom pictures of my wife and I were actually taken in that house, and it just went from there, like decades of memories. So intellectually, I am thinking about obedience and what obedience means, what role it plays in our life, what role it plays in society. Is obedience still seen as a virtue? Like if you were talking about a friend and thought, he was a really good guy, he was very obedient. Who says that? Like, who would ever say that? Like, even when I say the word obedient, like, it doesn't seem like it's a very like treated as a virtue or anything. And also, if there is a functional difference between obedience and forced compliance, and what difference it makes between obedience and forced compliance, especially in society. So that's it. Pass.
Just sin and obedience so far. We have hardly anything to talk about. All right. Corey, how about you?
Let's see. Personally, man, we're kind of Catholic heavy tonight.
Yeah, Grail Country tends to be a magnet for the Catholics for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I grew up super Protestant, and I'm currently also in RCIA. Yeah, Karen. We just had our priest over for dinner last night, which was kind of a new and foreign experience. And it's still, I have a deep sense of kind of being a foreigner in a foreign land, traversing new territory, learning new language and new practices. But it's exciting and a little bit discombobulating at the same time. So that's kind of been the mental state recently. Intellectually, I'm super behind the power curve, but I'm finally listening to all of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. I finished the second episode today. Super cool, super mind-blowing. Now I finally understand some of the terms I keep hearing him use in all the videos. So that's been fun. And then I'm still doing this research project with the Marine Corps where I'm at right now, where I'm trying out this circling dialogos / estuary protocol practice as like a thing to help military people improve their cognition, their mental lives, emotional lives, and even their warfighting abilities. And it's been a very interesting path to introduce people to these concepts who have no previous experience with this corner of the internet. Like they've never heard of most of these people before. So we had our second session today, and it's actually been really cool. But figuring out what that would look like outside of, the online communities has been something I'm noodling over a lot.
All right. Thank you, Corey. How about you, Joel? What's been on your mind?
Well, so personally, I've been working on this for a while, but I'm really gearing up to dig into writing the music for that project that Chad is working, I guess he's heading it up, that Peter Pan dystopian audio drama or whatever it's going to be. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And kind of related to that, like I really enjoy working on music, but for years, I haven't been able to sort of crack the code on getting what the other distractions out of the way to do it. And I try to just brute force willpower to not just like surf the web and go on social media and Netflix and all that. And I kind of just decided I have to remove the temptation, or at least partially. So I deleted social media off my phone, and that was a big step, and I'm pretty happy about so far. It's working well. And then I just canceled my Netflix today. So I think it's gonna be a good thing. And intellectually, still reading Paul Tillich's Courage to Be, getting close to finishing with that. Then estuarily, I mentioned this last time. We had I am gonna have we're gonna try like a trial run of a in-person estuary, with Luke and company here, and everybody I think is on board. So I'm excited about that because we've been flirted with the idea for years, and I think we're going to finally do it. So I think that I hope it goes well, and we actually, go from discussing to making it a reality. And I think maybe I thought of this because Grizz was coming on, but I thought about this prior to this about the future of estuary, like at scale, or how much it can scale or should scale, because like it did crack me up when John the other night said, he's like on the message, or what do you say? He's like, on Discord, people are discussing if the estuary is a cult, or they like, or like, and I was like, yep, I get that. And then there's also like, if not a cult, is it just a long game Jesus smuggle, and if it's not that, is it just like a philosophy club? And so those things become more salient as the scaling, because it's one thing for Paul, for PVK to say he doesn't want to define it in certain ways, but you kind of have to if you wanted to. It's part of to scale something. There's like a branding aspect and so on. So I guess that's kind of been thinking about that, and that's it.
Thank you, Joel. How about you, Graham? What have you been thinking about lately? I was a bad host and I didn't, so you've only seen it one time. Essentially, the areas that you can talk about and you don't have to talk about all of them. You can just talk about one or however many are salient to you. You can talk about what you've been thinking about intellectually. So like, head thinky stuff. You can talk about things that are going on contextually and like in your community and in the world at large. So think in terms of context, think about like gossip or news, right? Things that are going on around you that might be impacting you. You can talk about things that are going on in your personal life. There are things that are affecting you directly that are in your immediate sphere that is occupying your thought. And then the last category is estuarily, which is the word that John Van Donk invented in order to describe topics that are relating to, hey, how do we do this estuary thing that we're doing? How do we do it better? Or how should we define it, or something like that? So those are the areas. So along those lines, Graham, what have you been thinking about?
Well, first I'll say that what was modeled just now is here's some personal vulnerability, and then one of my pick from the four. But before I start my embodiment of that modeling, I want to say, Corey, since you're doing what you're doing, if especially as you're going through it, there's any clips that jump out to you, please make them and send them to me, because I'm also working my way through that series for the first time, like straight through, like a champ. Okay, personally, I recently got to spend Halloween at a potluck in what I would unflatteringly characterize as a disability village, of single, like, it's either 1-bedrooms or efficiency single housing units, and you have to like get on a list to be approved to be there. And it was beautiful. It was like it's a village. And like one lady even like commented how like this is family. And so that was awesome. and I got a gig doing what I used to do for somebody who needs to do a report for the VA. And so that's a road trip to see a friend, which is nice. And intellectually, I'm Grim Grizz on the internet, and I'm meeting with a bunch of estuary leaders or participants, at least, for like actual in-space participants. And let's just say there's people who are always online and don't do that. But since it's Grail country, I was thinking especially since it's so Peterson derivative, and well, maybe not because of that, but it's been echoing in my head that the whole Camelot situation, where, all right, fellas, you're supposed to go look in your own darkest corner for the gold. And basically, you guys are out in the field in those dark, like as far for the people that are online only, you are out there in the dark corners. And I was thinking things like this, like this session being recorded and being shared with the corner, as far as the corner is the online only portion, is a way for like a feedback loop to bubble into these concepts that are coming down from on high and Peterson and Vervaeke, and when being embodied by you folk. Like, what's bubbling up? What are you hearing? What are the concerns being voiced in your estuaries out there? What, like, so that's intellectually what I was hoping for with this, and what's been on my mind since I knew this was coming.
Wow, thanks, Grim. That was great. Appreciate it. How about you, Doug? What's been on your mind?
Well, personally, just making our way back home after a long weekend down at Disney. My wife's 15th half marathon was 15 years ago, or first, also at Disney. So just a fun way to kind of complete a circle and cheer for her. I'm a, I think, erstwhile professional fanboy on lots of levels. And then on the kind of philosophical and thinking front, um, reading Stephen Talbot's book, The Future Does Not Compute. And I don't even know exactly recall. I know it was somebody mentioning it in one of, it might have even been one of yours, Nate. And by the way, Nate and Grizz, the same thing happened. That was kind of the same thing that sealed it for me, was those conversations and kind of hearing particularly those conversations with Grizz. So now that Grizz, now that you're on here, do we call you Grim? Is that your first name? Do we go by that maybe?
It seems to be how like if it's a compatriot level, it's Grim. Like if we're in a situation, hey Grim, and then if it's a personal thing, it's a Grizz. So Grizz is for here.
Got it. Well, good news is no need for saving throw here. Things are going well. So and what's really behind that has been driving a lot of questions that have been eating at me. So it's kind of a personal professional piece, is kind of just wondering how much I've been working in Fortune 200 space for 20 plus years, and just have grown very weary of all the politics. But company I work for is a big environmental company, does a lot of good things, but I often wonder how much I've given to the machine. And so constantly wrestling with that. And then estuarily, this Friday, actually going to be talking with several people about launching one in partnership with my church. I've had one in the past, but what ended up happening was it ended up getting co-opted by folks who weren't comfortable with the salty water being in the estuary. So they wanted to wall it off and dam it off and make sure there was only fresh water. So that was a complication point, but I've got a group of folks who seem to be very interested. So I'll be making my pitch on Friday. So that is it for me.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. So for me, intellectually, I'm reading a bunch of really long, boring books like I usually do that I'm not going to talk about. But I specifically, the thing I've been thinking about is about the connection between evolution and the fall. Because for Maximus the Confessor, essentially there's no separation between atoms coming into being and the fall. So implicitly, everything that we experience as the creation isn't really the creation as God intended. So the fall, so the fall would, like all of essentially time and becoming and change and entropy, it would all be associated with the fall. And that's interesting to me because I've been doing a series on Valentin Tomberg's meditations on the tarot on my channel. And he, through Teilhard de Chardin, actually has this idea that essentially evolution is a groping trial, is what he calls it, that works in accordance with the principle of the serpent. And this ties back to Maximus's idea that the real moment of creation is the incarnation. Now, this becomes really complicated in its relationship to time. And I've been thinking about this because I just read Jordan Daniel Wood's book. And I said I wasn't going to mention titles, so I've already done it once. So I'll try not to. But I'm thinking about this because I'm getting ready to have Jordan on the channel to talk about his book. And I actually specifically through email already suggested this is one of the questions I'm going to have is like, hey, what do you think about this idea of evolution and the fall being connected? I'm trying to work this through. I'm not saying this is the case, by the way. It's just a problem, an intellectual problem I find interesting that I want to have a conversation about. It is certainly what Tomberg suggests, but not as simply as it's just the fall. What Tomberg suggests is that essentially there is another kind of evolutionary force that's associated with the vertical dimension, and so that you only see evolution as this groping trial if you're only looking at the horizontal, and if you
since it's my first time, I'm allowed to do ridiculous things like this. Nate, what do you think? You're giving me some guy's idea, but like if I want,
it's like I said, Grim, it's a question that I'm working out that I'm getting ready to ask. So that's what I've been thinking about, and I've talked about it longer than I should have anyway. But I have a hard time not explaining things thoroughly. So that's what causes me, because I just don't want to give it in a real shorthand and not have people understand the question, even the question that I'm trying to ask. And I don't have an opinion on it. I have some ideas about where I might ask questions, but I don't have a firm opinion on it. But I think it's an interesting subject, and I'm going to ask Jordan about it when I have him on later this month on the 19th. So that's what I've been thinking about intellectually. And then my other big thing that I've been thinking about is actually related to the Estuary. Jess Proviance, the host of the Kansas City Estuary, I've been working with him to put together Estuary promo video. We generated a list of 5 questions that we're going to have people take to their on-the-ground estuaries and ask the participants in their estuary to give answers to. It's going to get recorded. The footage is going to get emailed to Jess using a service that allows you to send up to 2 gigabyte clips through email, and then he's going to edit it together and put together a slick promo for Estuary with the best bits that we collect from the on the ground. So that's the other thing I've been thinking about, and I'm sorry I took so long to say that. So now that we've got a whole bunch of stuff on the table, Taryn, what would you like to delve into more?
Hey, oh wow, so lots of good stuff. I must admit I hadn't really thought about obedience until Philip brought it up, but now I'm like, yeah, like the difference between like obedience and forced compliance, like there's definitely a difference. And it kind of ties in a little bit with my thoughts of sin, right? So that's cool. Joel, I loved what you said, is this a cult? No, it wasn't it's not a cult. Okay,
Says you. No.
And Doug, I just wanted to say congratulations to your wife. 15 half marathons. Wow, that's impressive. Okay, so I guess in terms of the conversation, like the connection between evolution and the fall, like that's really interesting. I wouldn't mind hearing more about that. And yeah, obedience, and yeah, that's good. Pass.
Yep, Kate, Nate, I appreciate your longer explanations because I need explanation on a lot of things that you're talking about. So thank you for that. Please don't stop doing that. And I kind of feel like going with Grizz's suggestion because he's, the guest and he's new here. It'd be good to talk about concerns about the estuary, which goes to Joel's question about scalability. And also with Joel, like the first time I was at one of these meetings, he talked about wanting to talk about music. And I've been thinking about that ever since, and it always seems to get bumped off. So if it doesn't happen tonight, like someday I want to talk about music because I think it's like more important than a lot of people give it credit for. Yeah, there's a lot of connection here, again, with Karen about sin. Well, Corey is connected with the whole question about estuary and how it's working out with him, with his group, which is awesome. I mean, boom, you got a group, and you're exploring with the guys, and that's got to be awesome. I really love that. There's two quotes that I really liked from Douglas. It was, "How much have I given to the machine?" Which is like, boom, it goes to Paul Kingsnorth, and it's like, I want to hear more about that. And Nate, when you said evolution is a groping trial, I love that quote. Don't know exactly what it means, but would love to explore that further. And I think from my notes, I got everybody covered. So thanks.
Yeah, echoing a lot of what Phil said. I would also like to know more about what your perspective is on Estuary Grizz based on what you've seen so far and what the conversation is going on. I'm a little bit disconnected too because I don't like I've got a Discord account and I go on it occasionally, but I still don't even really know how to use it. I don't know if it's I feel like most of my experience with it has been more in person even than online, which is weird. And I've also got, I don't know about concerns. I mean, I'm obviously doing it, but like, I want to make sure that whatever it is that I'm trying to implement for people who aren't even associated with this stuff is going to be a good and healthy thing. So I would love to hear more feedback about, I feel like these always turn into, defining estuary conversations, but I think it's a helpful conversation to have. And then about all the stuff that was being said about sin too and obedience, and I'm very interested to hear more from Karen and Phil and anyone who can chime in on that too, in the sense that like, I almost feel like I've been wondering if there's a connection between obedience and like a appropriate relationship to wisdom as something that you kind of accept on, without understanding how it works. And I've kind of been noodling over that for a couple of months too. So I'd be curious to see how the conversation goes down that way.
Thank you, Corey. How about you, Joel? What would you like to explore some more?
Well, as per usual, everything is interesting on the table. But yeah, if we kind of went, and Grizz, if I understood what you were kind of putting out there on the table was, I tried to type this out or re-articulate. So I would say, you're thinking about what's going on inside this little corner ecosystem and how these types of meetings are influencing it. Is that kind of on the right track?
Excuse me. It's like you guys are knights of the round table. You've been out in the kingdom, what does everybody else at the round table need to know about what's coming up in your estuary meetings? Like, geez, the guys here are all really lonely, or everybody's really struggling with this issue in my community. And then that way those issues bubble up through meetings like this to the rest of the corner was my
Okay. Right on. Yeah. So that's, I guess I can just mention, for even though we've been doing ElsNet for quite a while, there's still a lot of folks that are not quite, they don't have that on the ground estuary going yet. You know, so it's kind of like, even though they're, to use the analogy, it's like we are the knights at the round table, but it's just like, what, anything to report, you know, Knight Karen, and it's just like nothing yet. There's some of that going on, but it's anyways, it'd be certainly interesting to talk more about that, because it's kind of related to what I put out forward. But the evolution, you know, question, Nate, in the fall, like, it'd be hard for me to pass on that one. So, so just so you know, Grizz, kind of what my role seems to come up a lot is I make the case that, you know, apologetics, like, we can't really get away from it, even though the little corner, the Christians in that space, I think there's a lot of sort of, you know, disaffected or disillusioned, or folks that are sick of, they came from maybe fundamentalism or whatever their background is, they're kind of sick of that, or not interested in propositional, you know, battleground stuff like debates, and so, but I always kind of say, like, well, we can't really get away from it, and this is a really interesting way to specifically talk about that, you know. So anyways, that'd be a lot of fun.
All right, Grim, you've heard a bunch of stuff put out there. What would you like to explore more?
Well, what I've seen to model it based is essentially, can you ad lib all of this? And so I'm going to make my attempt to do that. Is like, we can look at the foundation, we can pop open obedience and look at the motives for it. As mentioned just a second ago, there's like, hey, there's wisdom there, I'm going to obey that. Or there's loyalty. If I don't obey that, things fall apart. And then there's, this is for your own good and you're too stupid to know, forced compliance. So that we don't play that here. And so, and then to tie it into what Doug said is, and also the evolution of the fall and scaling the estuaries. We can look at what Corey's accomplished as this is what it looks like when an estuary works. How does it, what it looks like when it's manifest? Is that something scalable, and what can we learn from it? And then is Doug's collapse of the estuary he had because was it a failure of obedience to the protocol, or was collapsing it obedient to the protocol? And how was it sin that it didn't work out? Yeah, the evolution and scaling, and the, I don't know, to tie it to the fall, I didn't like that the you hit that God intended the really early on. It's like the I think it was what everything we've been experienced isn't what God intended. It's part of the fall, but clearly the fall was what was intended. So that's all there. There's me trying to play estuary.
You play pretty well. Doug, how about you?
I'm going to defer to the wisdom of the group. I think so real fast, just the reading a book called The Listening Life, drawing a blank on the author's name, but the basic intro part he talks about is that the words for listening share the same etymological roots that obedience does. So kind of a funny kismet opportunity here with what many of you have mentioned. I think, Grizz, I think it was good that it collapsed, because what had happened with this group was that there were several voices that were extremely strident about following a particular line of thinking or a particular type of theology. And so they were unwilling to allow other members to explore and think, people who weren't there with them. But they kind of enforced a very rigid and doctrinaire way of being. And it wasn't, I don't think that the intent was malevolent, but the practical effect was that it killed the group. And I don't, struggles. Was that a good thing? Maybe, maybe not. And in the sense of what the particular players tried to repurpose it into was they wanted to take it away from the group and make it kind of in the image that they had in mind, and other people had formed the group. So that was what led to that. So I'm just gonna stop here, Nate, and then pass it on to the next.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. So I think for me, I found myself to find Grimm's question about what is happening in the on the ground estuaries to be both insightful and moving, because it's like in that question, it's like, I want to see what impact this is having on people. How are they interacting with it? What are people getting out of this? Is this actually going to do anything for people? So I thought that was both an insightful question and it was a compassionate question. So that got my attention. And I think I should speak to that a little bit, since I actually do have the on the ground estuary, and an on the ground estuary, and have had for some time. I would say that the kinds of concerns that people are coming to the estuary with are, some people are just like seeking because they don't find a lot of any kind of answers in anything out there. And they're just like, they just want to explore. And then I have people that are really angry at the cultural moment that we're in, and they're afraid for and this is not like, for example, let me just give you a single concrete example that immediately comes to mind. There is a friend of mine who is an atheist, who is part of my estuary in Olympia. And one of his regular concerns is that he has a small child. He has a son who is, I think he's 3 or about to turn 3. So he's either 3 or nearly 3. And he is absolutely terrified about the kinds of ideas that he is likely to be exposed to out there in the culture at large, even though he is not religious at all. So he feels like he wants his son to have some sort of religious upbringing to inoculate him from the culture, even though he's an atheist. So him and his wife are going through this process of trying to negotiate something that they can both live with, because he was raised Mormon. So his default thing was he just started inviting the Mormon missionaries over to come to his house and talk to him. And he was like, seriously, like, hey, look, I'm not ever coming back. That Rubicon has been crossed. I'm firmly an atheist, but I'm okay with having my son being raised as a true believer, because I think that will give him some kind of inoculation from the insanity that's out there in the culture at large. And his wife, who was not raised Mormon, was pretty much like, no, not that. So, and she's still thinking that hopefully that they can do it through like some kind of parents groups or soccer and all that kind of stuff. And he's smart enough to realize that's not going to work. So he actually he asked if was interesting. One of the other members of my estuary who happens to go to the same church I do, he was honest enough to like recommend a church to him that was not our church, because he thought it would be like a better fit for him because he has a toddler, and they're just better they're better set up for dealing with children than our church is, and he had a positive experience there in the past, so he kind of recommended that church to my friend. So that's just a concrete example of the kind of concerns that are coming into the estuary and what people are coming there for. They want to hear, hey, I'm not crazy. Do you have anything to offer me in terms of the solution that I'm looking for this, what I perceived as being a very real crisis? So that's
I just had a thought of a branding thing, is we could call Estuary an anti-cult.
right.
Actually, that's actually really good.
Hey, like, I'm not crazy, it's kind of, it's subverting the whole, is it a cult? It's an what? Anyways, sorry.
Well, actually, I think it is kind of an anti-cult, because part of the whole thing with Estuary is like, we're not trying to get you to join any particular group, right? We're not like, I'm Anglican. I've told my friend he's welcome to come to our church anytime, and that because we're not going to kick him out because he's an atheist, but I certainly have there's no vested interest in directing him to any particular group, which is not a very cult-like behavior. So the idea that it's a cult is kind of silly, because if it were a cult, it'd be like, we want you to join this specific group.
I was going to say the Estuary protocol is anathema to cult principles, Anyways.
That you guys are able to stick to it despite my plans for this whole shebang is proof of the strength of the Estuary protocol, right?
We're stress testing it tonight, maybe.
Yeah, there's still lots of time there, Grim. Work your magic.
Well, can I just jump in?
Yeah. We're at that
kind of
phase.
along the lines. I want to ask Grim, as you are kind of, you said you kind of self-proclaimed as the Bridges of Meaning troll. So what is your opinion, or what do you think about this idea, or the running joke of, is Estuary a cult? What were your thoughts from afar? Did you sense any of that? Did you have that thought independently of what, this is kind of weird? What is this? Is it a cult of personality around PVK or Vervaeke or Peterson? Any of those thoughts that you've had along the way?
Not until the first moment of this estuary, when everybody was like the how we got here part, and it was all Peterson PVK.
Yeah.
That was like, okay, I don't see why you're saying that. It's completely irrelevant. To me, Estuary is there's Alan Watts, there's the raw material, there's Buddhism, there's Hinduism, there's what are they teaching our children, there's things like you go to church to worship and love the Lord, share food and whatnot, but the rest of the life, everybody's just been listening to Set. And Estuary is the Christianity I admire, or legendary, the myth of Christianity that speaks to me is when I first came talking to trolling PVK in the questions and answers, is we're getting close to the time where you Christian folk have to meet in each other's houses, bro. And that's, to me, that's Estuary is that, man. My notion that's the time we're in, Estuary is a little bit of that. It's there is a world out there, and for us, I don't know, those are my notions of Estuary. What it actually seems to be is close so far.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because what your point about like how we all start out with what got us here. I'm thinking back to, I used to have a Jordan Peterson group, back in the place that I used to live, where we just get together and talk about Jordan Peterson things. So we thought it was interesting. I feel like it's kind of a leftover of that, because at the time, 5 years ago or whenever, all this stuff was like, oh my gosh, nobody's ever talked like this before. And everybody felt so deeply affected by it. Everyone felt compelled to share their little bit of their experience, their I don't know what word you'd use, their introduction to this whole thing. And maybe we've outlived that. Maybe that's because I think what you're saying is right. Like, what's good and what's powerful about this, and really what drew people to Jordan Peterson initially, was people are suffering. People are dealing with real stuff right now that they don't know how to deal with or how to share. So I don't know, maybe that's an old thing that needs to go away. It seems like you're on to, yeah, all that to say, I think I agree with what you're saying.
I've said this on Twitter, so I won't hesitate to say it here. I mean, I've tweeted this at PVK. It's like, I think that Estuary is actually connected to the future of the church because of a lot of the things that Grim was just saying. And we may not have, I may not agree, like propositionally, I may not agree exactly with what his vision of what that means, but I have the same general intuition. And I do know that the church is going to have to change its form from what it is now. And I also think that Joel and PVK asks this question a lot, but I don't think the scale question is a legitimate, I don't think that's a Jesus question. That's a serpent question. I mean that. I really don't think, like, two or more.
It's a what question? It's not a Jesus question.
It's not a Jesus question. It's a serpent question. I actually think that dialogos actually works better. And I take the dialogos as being through the logos and a way to the logos quite seriously. It actually works better when it's not at scale. And that to me, like, the idea of scale is like, if you're talking about scale, then even though you may have the best of intentions in the world, but ultimately you're working on a Babel project. And Jesus Christ, a person, is God's answer to that. So.
Like, I was thinking, like, when I do get my estuary going, it's going to be mostly with, I'm working class, and it's going to be other working class people. And I am not going to mention this corner of the internet, because that will turn them off. Like, they might check it out, right? Like, Google it and whatever. And it's like, bro, that's not me. Like, I can't do that. I can't speak like that. Like, you want me to do Christian philosophy? Like, get the bleep out of here. So I don't know what my estuary is going to look like, because now with like getting church friends and stuff, I think it'd be really cool to get a blend just for comedy purposes. But it's not. Yeah.
No, just, I don't think any two need to look the same. I think that's like kind of the beauty of this model, is just like it's okay, Phil, that if your estuary looks different than mine, and if Grim decides to get one on the ground in unnamed place, then his will look different from either of ours, and that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, Nate, to kind of expand on that, because that's what one way to explain that or conceptualize that is, there's a difference between scaling like like estuary protocol as a framework versus scaling estuary estuary TM, like like the branding, like, or the cult of personality, or the official estuary thing. Yeah, so that's because I think there is the protocol is very malleable, and you don't, it doesn't have to be. But then I wonder about, like, if you're like, oh, where'd you come up with this idea? If there's like, how do we, because that's what I wonder about, is like, it's hard to explain what the little corner is to people that don't, and so you could just be like, oh, it's this philosophy club or so. I don't know.
So you don't necessarily mean scale so much as you do, like, what is the word you're looking for? I'm not sure.
Spread.
Or you could just reframe it as, what is the future of this, what we're doing? You could just say it that way, which is an open question because Vanderklay is so, kind of open with. Van Donk probably steers the ship more, than PBK, even though PBK is like the face of it in a sense,
Well,
It's kind of go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, as far as estuary marketing goes, like to Christians, it seems to be it's like it's here you can witness without witnessing, and you can just live your witness with these people who are struggling that want to talk about things you can't talk about in church. As far as like the marketing to anybody else, it's like I don't know, group reality testing, scientifically verified, swing on by.
Can we get that as a recording? We'll put that in the promo. No, but like
he's recording.
I was gonna say, like, it's worth considering too that like this is kind of Paul and John's idea of how to implement this stuff, but John Vervaeke is kind of trying to do the same thing, and like so is Jonathan Pageau in his own way. Like everyone's kind of trying to harness this. I don't know. It's not like these are new
Logos thing.
ideas either. This is a whole bunch of people synthesizing and finding that we're coming up with very similar stuff. I think it's, maybe it's appropriate that it manifests itself in a whole bunch of different ways. This is a way that happens to be, spreadable because it's a written protocol. It's a practice, it's a technique, right? But a technique is only a technique by itself. It has to link back to something. Just I don't know. That's where I tend to get stuck, is I don't know. I think the technique is good, generally speaking, because it's founded on good principles, but is that just a starting point? I don't know.
That's where it gets tricky. I was going to say too, as far as when we say what's the future of where's this all going to go? Because it's more of a framework and we don't want to make it estuary TM, like a cult of personality thing or a brand, as it were. Because of that, it's going to be exposed or vulnerable to different contexts and different personalities that take the reins of it. So what Doug described, I think that's probably the biggest risk, is it's going to want to be co-opted by certain churches that like they want to co-opt it as like a Jesus, like this is basically a Jesus smuggle that will eventually not really be a smuggle. It's just gonna be like, no, you're not allowed. It's going to violate the spirit of the protocol or what estuary was, because if it's anything, in the name, it's like the saltwater freshwater mix thing. And so I think that's maybe why with Corey's case it's working so well, because there's none of that. There's none of the baggage of like the religious bias or systems or fighting over like trying to steer it. It's just like, hey, let's use this framework. So I think all that to say, you're probably going to have a range of outcomes where some groups are really going to thrive and some are going to crash and burn, based on who gets a hold of it and ruins it or not.
Well,
And when I say,
think-
by the way, that is going well, it's, only second session. It was just me and one other guy this time, and it was 4 people before. So, depends on how you measure that, but
It's something.
was experience was awesome.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it's going well. I would say in terms of like I think that's why the estuarily word, that funny word, is in the protocol. It's like that's what that's there for, is so that it's not static and that has a built-in process of tailoring itself to
Self-correction.
the group,
Yeah.
to self-correction. Yeah, that's why that question's there.
Karen, you unmuted. I saw it.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things that I really love about Estuary is that it's a place for me to be a heretic. Like I don't have to censor myself. I don't have to worry about being labeled a heretic. and that's been lovely.
Oh, speaking of lovely, I got this. There's for the Christians, there's this saying like, be in the world and not of it.
Mhm.
And like, this seems to me like a chance to be with the world, as like somewhere between those.
Yeah,
Well,
sort of like, have put on training wheels or something. I don't know.
That's certainly a way to come alongside people, because I think that's where the streams get crossed sometimes. Is people get so focused on, having a mission or like having a project. People aren't projects. What matters? Go out and help people with the actual problems they have, kind of take on some of their suffering with them. It does its own work at that point. That's, I don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of finding like a quiet space to talk, because the internet and the world is bloody noisy. Like, I know I've said this before, but I mean, I can have a good conversation with anybody if we're just out hiking, and a lot of that conversation, we're not talking at all. He's looking at something or she's looking at something, I'm looking at it too. And it's just, like that. Like, I would love to have an estuary meeting that's that, like,
Mhm.
like the protocol just becomes what it is when you're out walking in nature. I mean, especially with dudes too, right? And make it be a four-wheeling estuary,
Amen.
Yeah.
so Corey, something you said, maybe want to tie this back to Grimm's Grail observation. When he talked about like the estuary hosts kind of being like, knights errant who were out questing for the Grail in the wild in their estuaries. And I think that's a good link, and particularly because I think fundamentally what the estuary is doing, if I were to try to reduce it to, a single sentence, like to kind of meet with the need that Joel is having to like, okay, what is this thing? It's about sharing suffering ultimately, like, because everyone who comes to the estuary is like, they've got some kind of suffering in their life. And the Grail question, the question that the Grail Knight is supposed to ask is why the Fisher King suffers. Like, that's the question that Parsifal doesn't ask, and then later gets a chance to ask. So I think that is a really good way of thinking about the function of estuary, because that's what it fundamentally comes down to, is this just being there with people to share their suffering.
And like, we totally have to give it a goofy name and call it a thing in order to do that with other people. Because if you don't have any LARP around it, it's like, hey guys, you want to get together and, share suffering and just talk about life and stuff? No, dude, what's wrong with you? Game of Thrones is on.
Yeah, when I was thinking about getting Marines interested in that, I was like, if I want to turn as many people off as possible.
I can just to piggyback off what Grim just shared. I've seen this kind of manifest in other people over the last several years, and you can see it in people's social media posts. And there's one friend I'm thinking of where he just kind of had this public, he just kind of spilled his guts about frustrations about, it's like he was isolated and lonely. Basically, he didn't use those words, but that's what he was saying, is like, and it's a guy from my old kind of music, band buddies community. And so, and we kind of had this commiserating over, it was Facebook, we were commenting on and stuff, but we were all kind of acknowledging that when we were in our 20s, this idea of community and connecting, it was so effortless, because we had, like, in my band, a couple of the guys rented a house and we practiced there, and we would have, house parties there and hang out and this and that. And so it was just that was kind of like the gang's headquarters. We would just like, random people would just show up, buddies would just come by, and it would just kind of naturally happen. And then we get older, and then not to mention culturally and the advent of, everybody's stuck at home or going on Netflix, and our devices consume us, and on, that all of a sudden you're like, what the heck happened? Like, why is this so hard to just like feel connected to a human like community? And that's kind of, Vervaeke's Meaning Crisis really digs into that. But I've seen that, like, even like years before this, like I saw it kind of happening, but I think that's the irony of, because I've said this before about other things, like I have certain friend groups that the only way I'm going to connect with certain people is if like we started a book club, or we started a band, or we did some, build something to build that around. And I'm sure you all know this. We have the certain friends that they're kind of on like the speed dial, and like they'll be that, it's effortless to connect with them. They're really close. Then you have this periphery of like, it's like, well, so-and-so, like he's a good dude and I really miss him, but it's too weird for me to just call him out of the blue. And so like, you need that excuse of like, but if you had like, hey man, you want to, join, start a band or do this thing or start this game night or do this thing, like then it wouldn't be as weird. And so somehow Estuary is helping. It's just it's a framework, but it's one just example of something where it's an excuse to, to get together. But not only that, it's like it levels that up in the sense that you get right to the deeper things, obviously, when you're, sharing stuff. But that was just an observation I've been thinking about for a while, and that's going to become more and more come to the forefront of culture, and like where we're going to be more and more isolated, especially if the whole metaverse really, it seems like it's kind of stumbling here with Facebook and stuff. But anyways,
it's funny, Joel, my atheist friend that I mentioned earlier, the first time he came to Estuary meeting, he was really excited afterward. He really enjoyed it. And he's like, this is just like the pre-game conversation for D&D night, which is the best part of the game. And I'm like, yeah, that's more or less it.
yeah.
Well, I say things that most people won't, and I probably shouldn't all the time. And like, I don't get to talk to many Marines, especially given my worldviews. But like, for me, you doing it, Corey, is like, look, given what we are, maybe if we get together and talk through shit, we won't get PTSD, and maybe we'll still be able to relate to our wives and stuff, and at least we'll have like, I don't know. I mean, yes, it's not going to be easy to market it, but like, I think it's more important for your Estuary group than others. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's really cool that you're able to perceive that, because those just two things that you mentioned right there, like post-traumatic stress and family relations. Like, yeah, what's cool about this practice is what it seems to be. I'm kind of doing a research project in tandem with this experiment that I'm doing here. It's linked to everything. I mean, you listen to John Vervaeke talk about it in his Meaning Crisis videos. Like literally, this is happening everywhere, and it's touching everything. And every little bit that we can do to help address it, like it. What does our cognition affect? What does our cognition not affect? But yeah, 100%. That's my heart for this. Is I'm hoping that it'll give people who don't have opportunities to participate in these sorts of ways in groups of people, that it would be a healing sort of endeavor. But we'll see. It's very much experimental. We'll see where it goes.
Now that you're here,
Exactly.
Doug, and making an appearance, you should, you should say things since,
Just settled in. So I'm getting caught up.
Perfect. Perfect time to redirect us. Do you guys do bathroom breaks in these things? Or do you just like is holding your bladder for 2 hours a part of the estuary protocol?
There's this
It's
thing
part of the
called a,
initiation.
well, there's this thing called a stadium buddy grim. It's pretty cool. So like if you're at a football game, you don't want to miss a play, just Google it. It's good. It's pretty cheap.
When my
Or
group
don't.
meets in physical space, people get up and go to the bathroom when they need to, and no one no one gets after them. Go for it. All right. So that's interesting.
So Corey, I really do like that. Like you're just doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like you just had one guy. Well, I shouldn't say just had one guy at the last meeting, but I don't know. It's impressive.
Yeah, there's something to be said. That's how I kind of like, that's how I started mine. When I started it, I just like rounded up, like, I think I had like, 3 people
Mhm.
at first. And just kind of went from there. And it doesn't, I mean, you don't really want it to be more than really 10 people is kind of a hard max. If you had a group that was more than 10, you would need to have a co-host, and you would have to split up into smaller groups.
Mhm.
I think, because it's just like, people would feel like they never got a chance to talk if it got to be too big.
Have you done it with 10 people? I'm curious, 'cause I was thinking
Yes, 10 is my
8 would be like a hard
10
max,
has been my peak attendance, has been 10.
and it was still
So,
manageable.
yes, but just barely.
Where do you hold it at? Sorry.
At my
Wait, what do you-
no, at my it's my church. It's in the social hall of my church. Christ Our Hope Anglican Church in Olympia, Washington.
Mhm.
Yep.
And that wasn't difficult to get the space or anything?
Nope. I just approached our then deacon, who was ordained as a priest while we were attending. And he was interested, and he sat in on Van Donk's Thursday group
Mhm.
to kind of get an idea of what it was like. And he's like, yeah, this is awesome, let's do it. And so he was serving as my co-host before he ended up going back into, he was a veteran, and he ended up feeling called to go into the chaplaincy. So he went back into the military. He was a Marine previously, but when he went back in, he went into the Army. So now he's in the Army. He's just finishing up with his chaplain training in South Carolina, and then he's going to be deployed to Colorado. So he started it with me, and then after my church recently lost both our he was the assistant priest, but we also lost our rector too, like within 3 weeks. So we have a newly ordained deacon who is serving us while we search for a new rector. And the church board voted to allow us to continue the project. So
Mhm. Is anybody from the church?
until they tell me that they don't want me there, then that's going to
Yeah.
continue to be our space.
Is anybody else from the church showing any interest in joining
Yeah.
Estuary?
Yeah, we have there's one guy, there's 2 guys from the church that are doing it. One of them just moved to Texas recently. But there's still another he's becoming a good friend of mine, actually. I actually just had him and his family came over last night, actually yesterday afternoon, after church about 2:00 in the afternoon, and my son ran a D&D game for their family. And they had a blast. And
Nice.
so, but yeah, that gentleman's in my estuary. Then I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. That's really the only person from the church now. So it's mostly not people from the church. There's a couple of people that found us actually through Bridges of Meaning or the Estuary Hub. Guy named David, and then Antonio, who came to us through Jacob's server. He's a Noahide. So I have like an agnostic. No, I have two. I have three agnostics, kind of a seeker type. I've got my wife is Jewish and she comes sometimes, and then a Noahide, and then there are like 3 Anglicans. So
It almost seems like there needs to be a D&D subgroup. You need to get my little brother's a really good DM. I need to get him in on this.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, it's the giant beard that just says friendly. Come on in.
You know, it's funny. After we had that meeting with Vervakian, he suggested that one of the tips he gave us to make women feel more welcome was to have food, right? And I had 2 women in my church come up and ask about. They haven't shown up yet, but they came and asked me, and they were talking to me about Estuary, and they like the first question they asked me was, "Are you guys doing food?" That was the very first question that I was asked. So I shared that with John, and he said, "See,
You should
exactly."
I recommend terrible food
Yeah.
because then like I don't know, maybe a woman doesn't want to participate and get all in the talky part so much, but really would love to be of service by bringing the food. You know, I mean, there's ways people can participate and reasons, and I don't know. I'd like a sandwich.
Yeah.
That's the troll part, I think.
No, I think that it's funny because before John said that to our group, something I've been thinking about, because that's how I'm wired anyway. I mean, I'm always feeding people all the time.
Yeah, that's a big part of your D&D ritual is.
Yep. Yeah.
It's kind of like the sharing the personal part. It's I used to work with this dude at the Italian restaurant, and he would always say break bread, vato. And it was like, yeah, because like when you come together around the table, it's like you're nourishing yourself already. And if you're nourishing yourself with everybody's present, you might as well eat too for the whole ritual.
Yeah. So when John said that, it was just like validated the instinct I already had. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna start doing it. I'm bringing in Cincinnati chili I have Estuary tomorrow. My Estuary group meets tomorrow. I'm bringing Cincinnati chili. So there we go.
Hey,
Well,
Grizz, earlier you mentioned Set, and I'm not sure everybody knows who you're referring to when you said Set. The first couple times, so the context of your comment, if I'm recalling correctly, we were talking about how I think the context was in scaling and just how we can kind of mechanize things. And then you mentioned Set. And for the longest time, I thought you were referring to the Egyptian god, and it turned out you weren't. And Nate mentioned the fourth wall. Can you maybe explain a little bit who you are referring to when you talk about Set?
I want to say that you're right and wrong. I am also referring to the Egyptian god, but these Black Mirror altars to him, but as far as the Egyptian god reference, it's like, especially since this is like everybody got here through Peterson, it's safe to say it's like that was one of the most valuable things I got from his lectures, is that the Egyptian guys had figured out culture enough to recognize that at some point, like the guy the good side gets blind, and then Set makes a move, and then Horus has to be born, and Set has made the move. I mean, the family is in shambles, the tribes are scattered, we're being atomized. So I don't know. that as far as the destructive force of society, that it's mind control. Literally, they try to turn you into a consumer. And one of the best ways to get you to buy things is to destroy how you think about yourself, to make you feel insufficient. And I don't. So yes and no. It's it is, to me, it's set and set. It's the same, but
No, Grim, I've said, it's funny, before I ever heard you say that, I've said for years that like we really started our long cultural decline the moment we decided it was okay to advertise toys to children on television. Like, so the Mr. Potato Head ads were like the first TV ads for toys. And I think it was like 1952. So that's like, to me, that is like seriously a significant moment of the beginning of a long cultural decline.
Is this part of the evolution you were talking about before, Nate, or is this devolution?
Oh, the evolution, it's interesting because I ultimately agree with Grimm's observation that it's not a plan B, because I also believe in evolution of consciousness. Yeah, that's complicated. I don't want to get into that. Wait until my conversation with Jordan Daniel Wood.
Okay.
I'll just plug Grail Country and say wait for that episode, and I'll get into it in detail.
Can we talk about sin a little bit then?
Absolutely. I have a question. Are sin and evil the same thing? And if they're not the same thing, what's the difference? Where does it go from being sin to being evil?
I mean, a sinful act as opposed to an evil act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering that, because sometimes people talk about as though there's only good and evil, and every evil act is a sinful act.
no, I mean, sin can start. It depends on if you go with the Peterson, sin is missing the mark, then of course everything evil is a sin, unless your service is by being evil, which is, a really fun topic if you guys want to go there. It's like, how much it's, I like it. I have this conversation with Burton Power on my channel where he talks about how the word hopomene or something, and how like good wine has to suffer. And like, if there wasn't evil, would we still be good wine? There's like, the contrast is necessary. We're here to gain the knowledge of good and evil. That's the trip we've been told this is. That's the world. You're gaining the knowledge of good and evil. So sin's gonna happen. I don't know. There's my 3 cents.
Well, yeah. I mean, classically, for most of the church fathers took like a kind of a Neoplatonic view of it. Essentially, sin is just ignorance at its core, right? And that's because evil itself it's a privation. It has no positive being. So I find Maximus the Confessor has an interesting idea, which I think is an interesting distinction. He suggests that mere sin enters into the realm of evil when it has to do with the idea that of human beings possessing a world. So it has to do when you take your sin and ignorance and you try to make it a reality in the world. You embody it. Because it has no positive being, because it's just a privation, it's completely dependent on us and to embody it. So it becomes evil when we give it body.
It's also very Tolkien. Sort
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
How's it Tolkien? Because I don't know. Can you explain that, Karen?
Oh well, okay, I'm not a Tolkien scholar. I'm rereading The Fellowship of the Ring right now, and I'm sort of dipping into the similarity. But I think when Melkor, I think it's Melkor, yeah, and he wants to create, like, but he can't. So I don't know if it's an active absence, like a literal nothing, but he can't bring into existence his own species. Like he can't create man like the true God
Right,
did.
so he has to actively bring about and create like illusions, which connect. This actually does connect to this idea of evolution and the fall that I was talking about, that I've been thinking on too. So, but yeah, that's
I got something I want to jump in with real fast. In the beginning, Karen spoke of the sin as the prohibitions versus sin is missing the mark.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to say that my 3 cents on that is that the prohibitionary nature is like, these are the things that sully you, that like, here's in case you don't have, in case you can't tell, these are the things that make you unholy. These are missings of the mark. And then the other notion is like where to aim at once you like don't do like the hell behind you and the heaven and forward. Those are the 2 parts, the way
Yeah,
they work.
And that's kind of the way C.S. Lewis describes it, with the, every decision that you make is either aimed towards good or evil. Sin could be like the thing that aims. I guess anything that's not good is probably necessarily evil. So if it misses good, then maybe it's aiming towards evil, but you're becoming that which you're aiming towards. So you could manifest at the end, if you continue to aim away from the good, you'll end up manifesting evil. Maybe that's the difference between sin and evil. It's like sin is the thing that you're pointing at or missing with, and evil is what's manifested if it happens long enough.
Yeah.
out of your ignorance of the good.
Yeah.
So it begins in ignorance, but then it becomes this strangely positive thing that we call evil through your embodiment of it.
But does that mean that every act is either good or evil? Because it kind of feels as though there should be something in the middle there. So sort of no man's land. I don't know.
So there's that's where the levels of consciousness come into play too. This one of the things that was really convincing for me in terms of the legitimacy of Catholicism or Orthodoxy over Protestantism is this level of embodiment, I guess. You could, I don't know if it's participatory knowing or like a procedural or what, but the sense in which the habits that you have, the things that you do unconsciously, that you're not even aware of, they're still directing you in a direction,
Yes.
whether or not you're aware of it. And so in that sense, I guess I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know if I even have like a guess, but for sure, you're always moving in one direction or another. I don't know if every single little tiny decision participates in that, but I feel like you could make an argument that it does.
Yeah.
Well,
You're-
yeah, that's actually like our necessary, our absolute necessity to be moving or acting is kind of what characterizes our ephemeral existence in the material realm. We have no way of avoiding it.
Do you guys have a policy for throwing someone out of Estuary? Because hold your answer for a second, because I want to get through the behavior.
You
But
asking for a particular reason? You
I'm
nominating
about
somebody here?
I'm about to test. Like Joel likes to talk about music, and Phil said it was sad that we don't ever. And Nathan is Nathan, and then he said the word necessities. And like, oh, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, maybe it was last night, my dad was singing, and it's his birthday today, and it's all about the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Oh,
Forget about your worries and your strife. No, singing's allowed as far as I'm concerned. I'm down for that.
All in
was
favor
awesome.
of booting?
No, but you know, I mean, despite the joke, that's actually a great question, though. I mean, because it is like, you know, I think it should be almost impossible. You know, I can remember like, I think that like maybe is something that's like makes Estuary like different from church, and maybe like almost closer to like something like, you know, a 12-step group or something like that. It's like you should be able to like behave pretty badly and say that it's all bullshit and swear at people, and you know, as long as you're not like, don't get, I guess physical violence would probably be the only thing I would consider like a bright line. It's like, you know, if we have to, if you're actually like threatening people, we might have to get a restraining order. But like, I don't think anything that you could say would be, you know, unforgivable. So
It's interesting for me to hear you say that, because when I was trying to figure out how to frame this for people who have no clue where this protocol is coming from, I decided to come up with like a little instruction pamphlet to give to people who are, you know, potentially interested. And I decided to have a little agreement thing too, to kind of build people's comfortability in this whole thing. And like, you know, if you're going to participate in this group, everyone will take an agreement to be confidential about the things we talk about, so people are comfortable with it. But I actually included a clause where you'll be asked to leave if you don't participate in, you know, I had an explanation of you have to abide by the protocol, and that means participating in good faith. And I kind of had a little thing that defined what it means to listen in good faith and to speak in good faith, and come up with topics in good faith. But like, I feel like if what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, Nate, that like people should be free to vent and express themselves, but there's a way in which it destroys the spirit, or maybe subverts the spirit of what we're doing, if somebody's like actively coming into the conversation to, you know, specifically to attack people, or
Mhm.
specifically to derail the dialogue.
I think
know,
people
it-
should feel free to tell people that are doing that to shut the fuck up too. I mean, let's like, you know,
Sure.
I'm just saying that like if someone does that, it's like I wouldn't ask them never to come back. I would talk to them afterwards about, hey, that's not, we try not to do that here. Don't do that again, please, you know, kind of thing. And I think if people, if they're not getting along well with the rest of the group and the group is calling them out for their bad behavior, I think it'll self-correct, I would hope. I don't know.
So
But I do, go
let me
ahead, Doug.
continue, because this would be hopefully instructive by virtue of a missed lesson opportunity. So Grizz, to your question, I probably, so there was a co-leader and I who had run the group that we had had for years, and it was open to any theological background. It was all Christians, and we were just reading through the Bible and then just talking about things that are very much estuary protocol like. But this one gentleman was very insistent on combating heresy and came in and took it over. And I think where I missed is I had the sidebar conversations, but I tolerated it for too long until it did. What it did was it drove away the people who were truly interested in having community. And then his sycophants, and then a small remainder of us who were committed to being in the group no matter what. And that was what it, and then now finally he's subsequently left. But I think I waited too long, and I allowed that, thinking, okay, I'll be open and hey, estuary, right? This is just whatever goes, goes.
You know, Doug, I think maybe this is a good thing. And I never haven't thought of this before until you brought that up. Maybe the thing to have said to him is that, hey, it sounds like you have it all figured out. And I'm really happy for you that how you have it all figured out. But estuary is very much not for people who have it all figured out. The rest of us here don't have it figured out. We are all people that suffer from you know, real problems and ignorance, and we don't think we have it all figured out. So maybe this isn't the place for you. And just
Well, and
like give him the feedback that he wants for his ego, just that like, wow, you're really smart, you got all the answers, that's great, but maybe this isn't the place for you. Because I think like the AA connection, or any other kind of 12-step group is a strong kind of way to think about this, because I think ultimately, like, Estuary, what I've seen when it's working at its best, it's creating that kind of space for people who have problems that aren't necessarily covered by those groups, but they still have very real suffering. They're still suffering from reciprocal narrowing in their lives, and they can benefit from that kind of like open and honest and raw process, even though they don't necessarily fit into one of those groups.
Well, I think that's where the Estuary protocol can be really powerful, and where, had I known it at the time, something I probably would have introduced. So we're gonna reboot that group, and I'd like to make that Estuary protocol more explicit. So if you want to, defend, great, start up your own group and go defend and go crazy, have fun with it. Whatever you like to do. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm hypothesizing, it's a D&D game in my head. And wouldn't the opening of Estuary be when this sidebar conversation you're talking about? I don't know how much I endorse that, but like, to the extent that the Estuary protocol is supposed to be self-correcting, the Estuary section of the protocol, wouldn't the thing be to call him out on the like not letting, like, dude, I want to say, like, Estuarily, what's happening the last 2 times we've come here is like, dude jumps down my throat every time I'm heretical and I'm being stuck. There's a problem. So wouldn't, like, I don't know, that seems how the hypothetical angle to recommend.
Yeah, and I like Nate's angle on it as well. At the time, I think that the intention and the making explicit of the idea that this is a fresh and salt water meeting place, and if you want to filter out all the salt water, then it won't be an estuary anymore. And our intent and goal, so maybe Karen, to your question, our intent and goal here is to have an estuary. So by adding filters, we're defeating the purpose of what we've set aside. Now, if you want to set something up on your own, please be my guest. But I think it violates the spirit and intent of what an estuary is. So is that sin? But is it destructive to what we intended? Yes. And in which case, that's not a good thing. Is it evil? I don't know. Maybe it's kind of that lowest form. Maybe it's the first ring in purgatory.
All the flavors you could have chosen had to be salty.
Well, Doug, maybe in that specific case, the issue was this person was like a leader or a co-leader of the group, right? Because
he came in and inserted himself as a co-leader because he was there to help and help prevent all of the bad thinking that was going on.
Yeah, because if that hadn't turned into that scenario, because then there's the tension of, if someone comes in and kind of like they have all the answers, but they're not a leader, it's like you'd hope the protocol could withstand that, because if we talk about it's for anyone can come, maybe that's their perspective. It's like, so do we make space for them and then see if the protocol can be like, okay, well, that you feel like this is the absolute, you've got this right, and this is what you feel. But as long as if they can put that out there, but still respect, that's the question. Can they respect everyone else enough to let them, share, I guess would be the ultimate, if they're constantly jumping in and like, how can you let Grizz say that? Or whatever, like that would be obviously like a time to step in and sidebar, I would think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's pretty not viable to have someone who's a heresy cop in an estuary if it's going to be a functioning estuary. I just, that seems like it's gonna pretty rough situation to deal with.
Yeah.
But I always like, okay, to be a little salty myself, I still don't know how the heck Protestants are defining heresy. Like based on what authority? You know,
Based on their denomination's statement of faith.
My
Well, yeah.
my understanding of Protestants and heresy is that the only thing that's unforgivable is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And so, other than that heresy, by all means, just make sure you ask JC to wash it away.
I learned the same
Well,
thing in the Catholic Church about the Holy Spirit, what you just said, but not that I know a whole lot.
Well, there's still lots. I mean, the Catholic Church would still define lots of heresies beyond. I mean, heresies are just not. I mean, what you're saying is more applicable to sin than to heresy, but it's a giant science. So it's just not just in that now.
If you're
It's my
talking about-
fault. It's my fault for trying to make a joke at Protestants' expense on about it.
No, that's why there's 35,000 Christian denominations or whatever.
Yeah, if you want to have a heresy, just go start a new church. That's an option.
Right. Yeah. Then you're no longer a heretic. Exactly.
I think if you want to be a heretic, just talk to other people. Honestly, in a way, I mean, if there's low-level heresy.
Well, it's if you're thinking, I mean, honestly, if you're seriously seeking the truth, you're gonna I mean, if you're, first of all, heresy is such a propositional layer thing.
Yeah.
And it's also pretty much inevitable. And I can remember my theology instructor at Thomas Aquinas College, he actually said that to our theology class. Like, he's like, hey, I want you to feel free to share your ideas in this class. You will commit heresy inadvertently, I guarantee it, but don't hesitate to say what you think as we go through the text. It's so yeah.
No, it's actually that's a perfect analogy to what we were just talking about with Estuary. Like if you submit to the practice of the dialogue, and you're submitting to the spirit of the group, and you're trying to intentionally be inclusive, and you're paying attention to other people, that's kind of the stated purpose of what we're doing. And yeah, it kind of doesn't matter almost what you say, as long as you're doing it in good faith, so to speak. In the same way, there's so much disagreement within the Catholic Church, which is something that's almost, it's a relief to discover that you can have different opinions and not agree with all the doctrines that they've got written down and still be, not everybody has it figured out. You can still participate.
Theo bros do not approve.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think
Okay.
Estuary is for Theo bros, though, to be honest. I just
Not
don't.
usually.
No, I mean, I really do think it's for people who don't think that they have it. I mean, that they don't, and they could be for Christians and people who aren't Christians, and or people of any faith or non-faith. But it's definitely for people who don't think that they have all the answers. Because I don't understand, what are you doing Estuary for if you think you have all of the answers?
Right. Well, one of the ways I've dispelled that when that's become contentious since then has been, look, I don't even agree with me 20 years ago. So
I
if
don't
can't-
agree with me 5 minutes ago sometimes.
so 20 years ago me and 10 years ago me, I don't agree. So if I can't maintain through time internal consistency, then where are we at here? And I think that's the other thing. And I appreciated what you just said, Corey, that the respecting of persons and kind of this recognition that we never start in the same place. Our backgrounds and experiences are very much different. And so those lead us to, then when we come into dialogue, for me to insist that you arrive at the same place I have at the same time seems really strangely arrogant. And so that's where, that's kind of where now I've recognize, okay, here's where I'm at. And that's what I've appreciated in these groups that I've seen modeled so often, is the ability to disagree about any one particular topic, or not even necessarily to disagree, but simply to, hey, this is my perspective, and to take these alternate perspectives, and everybody goes, ah, that was interesting. And I appreciated learning that. In the process of listening, there's no, and now maybe the question on coercion earlier, there's no insistence that I must assent. And I think that's something I see in the culture, is that, if, I'm trying to make sure that you're on my side, well, you listen to the other guys, you can't do that. That's anathema. You can't listen to opposing viewpoints, because those will contaminate you. We must maintain our purity at all costs, or the opposite. That oh no, that was good enough.
Yeah, you can kind of see, like, I think there has to be space in the estuary for that kind of that AA sort of notion of a God of your own understanding, and just to be okay with that. Like,
Dude, will you stop selling it as AA? This is gonna be on the internet. I mean, no, I can't. That's not. It's well, I'm not here. There's not 12 steps. There's like one step. It's have a discussion with other people. There's like 4 different angles we use for it. But like, this isn't like what you don't have to just keep coming. There's just so many negative things about AA that I really, really don't like that you did that. Sorry.
no, it's okay. I mean, that's fine. I think I was saying that in a particular context about a particular point, which is that in emphasizing that insisting on that someone have a particular theology is a bad idea in the estuary environment, and that's it.
Something I wanted to sneak in here before I don't know if we were going to wrap up at 9 or whenever, but something I wanted to go back to. I was struck by, we talked a bit about, we're kind of separating out the estuary protocol as something to promote and share versus like Estuary Inc., and there is a tension there, because we kind of talked about, maybe it shouldn't scale, and we don't want the Estuary Inc. thing to be what scales. But if that's the case, then is there a tension there of the fact that there's an estuaryhub.com and this promotional stuff going on? Because, and as far as what that is, it looks to me like the Estuary Inc., it's kind of like cell groups for Bridges of Meaning, or the Little Corner, because the little corner is a brand as well now, basically, whether we like it or not, I think. And so that's just an interesting thing. I suppose we'll have to navigate that as we go.
Yeah, I find myself drifting away a little bit from this corner, or at least PBK is a center, and it's not something that's bad going on. My interests are changing, and in this little corner as a community is doing what all communities do. It's also, sorry, I shouldn't put words like that in, but from my perspective, it's getting a lot more specialized. So I'm kind of going to the other smaller channels, and I'm just, okay, if I see what Nate has on, it's like, I don't know, I can't really dig that, but other of his shows, I can get into it. Or if like Karen Wong's channel, most of her videos I can't really watch because I don't know what she's saying, and I don't know what her guest is saying. But if somebody's on with a certain topic, then it's cool. So it's kind of like, instead of using this little corner as a place I'm always hanging out. It's now like a bookstore. I'll go in and I'll just kind of browse. That's how it's working out for me anyway. I have no idea if that was connected.
Well, is that, you could ask then, is it still a brand in that, even if it's a bookstore that we go, it's still like a filtered, curated, or what, type of thing there, I suppose.
Yeah, it's definitely getting, in my opinion, it's getting way more filtered. Way
What do you
more.
mean? Can you explain what you mean by that, by filtered?
That, again, this is just from my opinion. I've noticed in the last month or so, the level of what I would call academic conversations has sped up incredibly. Like everybody keeps saying there's something going on with this corner of the internet. Well, the leaders that are naturally rising in this corner, like they're all jiving on each other now, and it's sped up. And I'm like, I was almost, like, I saw the back of that car. I was almost up to the back of that car, and I was like, just sped off, and it's fine. It's just that, okay, where's the off ramp? Because I there's no way I'm catching up to that. And again, it's fine. That's what I'm seeing anyway. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that.
I would, I'm noticing that how immediately defensive I am, which is fun. But there's two thoughts that I had while you were talking. Is one is like, yes, please let it be a natural progression from someone to find the corner into Estuary and then out into the real world, where they keep bringing back to Estuary what they're getting out there. That's great. You're moving away from the corner, less time on YouTube and more like helping your family. Yes, God, please. But and then like, that's good that that's natural progression, especially if the estuaries remain as a way to stay connected to the community you found in this process. But then defensively, I want to say that Thunder Bay just happened.
Mhm.
And so there was a giant consummation. And so there's a whole lot of afterglow and processing of what happened in that. And that I think that it's not a matter of you're not going to be able to catch up to the car. It's just like there was a thing, and it's part of the story. But
That's
by
a
all
good-
means, get out in the world. So.
No, that's a great point, Grizz. Thanks for that. That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, part of the estuary is you flow in, you flow out, right? Like I've noticed kind of the same thing. And I think for me is just the amount of content that's being generated now. Like I'll read or watch, one of every like 10 of Paul's videos. And since Jordan Peterson's migration to Daily Wire, maybe, I'll watch every one out of 10 of his. Like it's just too much stuff. I'm not going to try to stay plugged in to the Twitter feed of the little corner, so to speak. But this, I always know that this exists here. You can come back to the repository, the archive, find things that matter. And there's always going to be other people coming in and out of the estuary above your level, below your level. There's always going to be a place here, it feels like. And I'm free to come and go as I want.
Well, and as you're working with your estuary on the ground, it seems like it's as I think you're going to find it that in your on the ground estuary, it's probably not going, like, I think in the host training groups, it's pretty much all the standard story that we got at the beginning of this, where everybody came through this whole Peterson, Vanderclay, Peugeot world to some extent, and that's how they ended up connecting to estuary. But the people who are coming into your on the ground group that you're starting up are probably going to have no connection to that whatsoever. So they're going to have other things that are salient to them that they're going to want to talk about that like have no connection to, this corner. So very few of the conversations that happen in my estuary group, like none of them, because I do have some people that are connected, but most of them aren't.
And just for Grizz's benefit too, we've had this conversation with the ElseNet specific estuary. You know, estuary itself is always the central topic of conversation because we're all leaders.
Well, it
trying
was bound
define
to
what this
be, it was
is.
bound to be tonight because that's
Yeah.
kind of what Grim is wanting to do, is find out what estuary is all about.
Yeah, but what
Um,
Nate said is absolutely true. Like in the experiences estuary and like to estuary things that I've done outside of this, you know, the topics are very rarely this focused and usually a lot more personal, which is, I think, frankly, what people crave.
Yeah. Yeah, the estuary host group talks tend to be a little bit more intellectual than what happens in my estuary. People talk about the stuff that's going on in their lives that's bothering them in my local group, you know, or in the world. You know, I think like our last meeting, we spent a long time talking about, hey, you know, nuclear war is a thing that might happen. And a lot of the people in that group, it's like lived through the 80s. And it's like, we never thought it was going to happen then, but sure as hell looks like it might happen now. That's a thing. We should talk about that.
That's, I don't know, it just, to me, it seemed like this was, like, as far as scale and evolution and whatever, but that it's part of this distributed cognition we're doing. It's like we're thinking together in this new virtual space, and that it's great. I think the ones on the ground should be the personal stuff, and I think it's a great opportunity that this one exists so that the personal stuff can bubble up. And like, how do you guys close these? Just everybody just bounces?
Please sing.
Usually the host will just point out that we're wrapping, we are getting close to our time, and offer people to have a chance to offer their closing thoughts.
All right, famous last words, anybody?
We need a theme song.
Did we sing happy birthday to your dad too, Graham?
No, he doesn't
Okay.
watch. He doesn't
Okay.
watch.
Good.
Let's talk about justice, Nate. Can we do that for 2 minutes?
Oh boy. Justice and mercy can't be separated. That's my big take there. There you go.
Well, it's just us, and that's a mercy. Karen, Joel, you guys
hey,
wanna say
hey,
anything?
Graham. I know. I thank you for hanging in with us for the full 2 hours. I know that's like beyond your normal tolerance, so it's very appreciated. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to get together and do this.
Well, I hope
So,
that
yeah.
if you guys haven't ever watched anything on my channel, you'll at least come watch yourselves. And thanks, everybody.
Yes, go watch
Thanks,
yourselves on
Thanks,
Griff's
dude.
channel.
Thanks for
Chris.
your work.
Thanks, everybody.
Mm.